right. So, hello everyone, and thank you guys for taking time out of your evening to join us here. You are probably watching it on Let's Raise Emotionally Intelligent Kids on Facebook, but if you're watching a little bit later, you might be somewhere else online or somewhere on YouTube. And I would invite you to come over to Facebook and join the group Let's Raise Emotionally Intelligent Kids. Because this is where we have pretty awesome conversations about everything to do with parenting, kids, emotions, behavior, being a parent, and all of that really good stuff. So I'm very excited tonight because I have secured Naomi Stockman, who is, I suppose in my eyes at least, but I'm sure many more, an expert in really, what we're talking about tonight, which is, are we putting our stuff onto our kids? Because us as parents really, if we're not aware of our internal state and our emotional state and our vibration and our thoughts, and I think, in fact, you have said our very self-worth, that can be directly projected onto our kids, right, without us being aware of it. So,
absolutely, yeah.
This, I have had quite a few people saying, hey, where is this being streamed again? Where can I watch it tonight? What's the link? Like, how do I find it? I'm like, it's okay, you won't miss it. I think this seems to be like such a huge topic, and I think a bit of an area of concern, I guess, for a lot of parents. I know I'm kind of thinking about what are my interactions and my connections with my kids, what are they doing to my kids and how they're shaping my kids, so yeah, I want to say thank you for being here tonight. So I want to give everyone a little bit of your background so that they know sort of where you're coming from in your work. Yes. Don't worry, guys, at the end I'm going to ask Naomi how everyone can learn more about this stuff if you want to implement it in your family, and support your parenting and stuff like that. So we'll get to that good stuff at the end. But yeah, and if you are watching along, I can see there's a fair few people hopping on live. I'm watching on the Facebook feed. So please say hello. Tell us where you're watching from, say hello, give Naomi a hi. And if you're watching later on in Facebook, do a little hashtag replay comment so we know that you tuned in and whether or not you found it helpful and beneficial. So yeah, let me tell you guys a little bit about Naomi. I think, as I was saying before, this work, we know, can give us a really powerful, it's a powerful way to help our kids that actually benefits the whole family, right? And this is all the work that Naomi does. We're very aligned in kind of our focus there. Naomi has a really broad range of training in lots of different various fields: emotional, mental, physical health. She's a clinical hypnotherapist, she's a trauma therapist and a nutritionist. So this lady knows her stuff and like deeply, deeply knows it. The conversations that we've had over the time that we've known each other have always kind of left me thinking, oh my God, yeah, like it makes so much sense. And it's so powerful, the stuff that we speak about in terms of parenting and things like that. Her primary modalities are a combination of hypnosis, directed imagination, embodied processing, EFT. I have never spoken to you about EFT before. I didn't know that. I'm sure I know this much, and NLP and RCT. So you might have to tell us a little bit about what those are. But Naomi works through the whole range of teenagers, grandparents, everything in between. And she really recognizes that emotions are not just stored in the body and in the unconscious, but they are actually passed down through generations like an invisible baton. I love that concept. I love that metaphor. It's not a concept, it is what it is, but it's that metaphor of passing it down. And over this last year, I've learned so much and read so much about that. I know this much compared to someone like you, but yeah, so the last little bit I want to say, I know I'm talking a lot at the start and I don't usually like to do this, but I want to let everyone know sort of where you're coming from and things like that. Naomi believes that the best thing we can do for our kids, really, and I agree with this, is to work on ourselves and clear our own emotional baggage, because when we change, everything changes. And I explain it as a bit of a ripple effect. We only have to work on ourselves. The ripple effect does the rest.
You've got all that so right. You have.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Steph. It's a real pleasure to be able to speak to the parents. I work mostly with mums and dads. Some people aren't mums and dads, but that's primarily who I work with. And a lot of the time, people will say to me, oh, what about my daughter? What about my son? Or this happening or that happening? And I always bring it right back to, look, there's only one person that you can control, and that's yourself. And when you work on yourself, it benefits the whole family. And what Steph was saying about that baton being passed down, I always say to my clients, what you don't heal, you repeat, and someone has to solve it. If you don't solve it, it'll be your children solving it or your grandchildren solving it. And that's what we call generational trauma. And as Steph would be aware from the research she's done, it's been proven, like the DNA has been analysed, and it's a scientific fact that it does go down. So I do a lot of work, it's called trauma therapy, but in actual fact, if you're alive, you have had trauma. So trauma is just defined as an event or a period of time which is distressing, causes emotion, but the main key factor of trauma is where you were either powerless or your power was taken from you, because it's that powerlessness that creates a feeling of lack of safety, and lack of safety then causes anxiety, worry, fear, doubt, self-protective measures. It causes us to develop strategies in order to gain back power. And if you think about parenting, a lot of it is about power, really. I mean, kids having power, adults having power, how to use that power for the benefit of everybody. So there's a lot of, with what I do, working with the parents or working with the adults. First of all, every adult was once a child. If they're not a parent, they were a child. And what I notice, I'll give you some background. Okay, so the unconscious mind is what's running our life. And I've got a diagram that I usually show people. It's got the mind being this large space, and then this little pea-sized dot that represents our conscious mind. And people think that they run their life with their conscious mind, when in actual fact, the programming that we receive while we're young, and 0 to 7 are the key years that everybody kind of references, but it's 0 to 7, and then it's any event which was emotionally charged, powerless, distressing. They really impact us because our unconscious mind is programmed through our imagination, through emotion, through repetition, through trance. And so there's all these factors that can impact and change the programming in your unconscious mind. Yeah. So when we're talking about people being clients of mine as adults, a lot of the stuff that we're working through is stuff that they've picked up when they were younger. And people will say, you know, I had a great childhood. My mum was lovely. She was a school teacher. My dad was a banker. We went on family picnics. Why am I feeling like this? Or why do I have bouts of, you know, panic or anxiety or rage, or, you know, why am I not functioning at my optimum level? And, you know, when we go back and have, you know, do the processes, we don't sort of reference it as going back, because it's not, I don't do any kind of talk therapy. But there's always like situations, and it can be so minor. It can be, you know, wetting your pants in kindergarten. It can be anything like that. So it's all this programming. So that's just some background about how important that the unconscious is, and the programming. So
yeah. I was going to say, what are some of those things? What are some of the, I don't know if this is right, but this is the way I explain it. You should probably correct me, is that we all do have, as you said, trauma, but I explain it kind of as either lowercase t trauma, or like the wetting the pants, or capital T trauma, you know, like a big abuse or something like that. So I don't know if that is right, but I am so many penny drop moments already for me, and I wonder if people watching are having the same moment, because I'm thinking, you know, some of the things, like you've just said, wedding pants in kindergarten or something like that. I also had a beautiful childhood, and you know, we had a great schooling life, and I did relatively well at school. My parents stayed together. There was no breakup there. You know, great group of friends. Everything was peachy, so to speak. And yet I developed such a strong anxiety that made me, I think, I can't remember if we've spoken about this before, you and I. Now I can talk about it. Before I did this work, I couldn't. But I wasn't just getting the sweaty palms and the heart racing and the really nervous, oh my God, assembly or job interview. It was like my body took me out. I fainted. And that was the like far, obviously, end of the spectrum where my body was like, this is a threat, can't cope. I'm going to take you out of this to cope. And like, I guess that for me was trauma, because I kept replaying that, and it was so embarrassing, and it was so like traumatic, you know, to do it in front of people and then think there's something wrong with me. So I'm glad you said like an example of just wetting your pants in kindergarten, or something that we kind of think is innocuous. We've all had those things growing up, right? But that's the stuff that creates, like, it just continues with us, right?
Yes. And when you just said there's something wrong with me, that brings me to the what I call the 3 A's. So there's only ever one of 3 things, or possibly 2 or possibly 3, but there's only 3 things that people can actually be struggling with. And it's the need to be accepted and acceptable, the need to be able, so capable, and adequate. So adequate, accepted and acceptable, and able. So it's looking at, you know, am I enough? Do I belong? Do I fit in? And do I have personal power? Am I capable of things? And if any of that is somehow jeopardized in our childhood, it can stick with us and it can affect us. So
it's huge, isn't it? And I think a lot of us, we don't get taught this stuff. We're not aware of, I wish this stuff was taught in schools. I just had the conversation today about the fact that, generally speaking, academics is one tiny slice of what we should be educating our children about. Obviously, I believe emotional intelligence comes in there, but just knowing about our mind and the way it works, and those sabotaging beliefs and those limiting beliefs and things like that. I just think, wow, wouldn't it be so beneficial and so empowering for kids to learn this stuff? But anyway, like you said, we've all been a child once and we've grown up. And so now, you know, the topic of the stuff that we're talking about tonight is all related to this, because it's, am I putting my stuff onto my kids? Can you tell us more about that? Whatever you want to speak about, whatever you want to share about. I'm like, I want to hear it.
Okay, so referencing back to the unconscious, it runs our life. So we might think to ourselves, gee, I should eat that salad, but our unconscious says, no, go and eat that instead. So that's the same with parenting. We know what kind of parent we want to be. You know, no one has a baby and thinks, I'm going to yell at this baby and I'm going to send it to its room and I'm going to just make it feel bad. But most of us at some point have, you know, done things parent-wise that we probably wouldn't want the cameras on us while we're, you know, got steam coming off us and that kind of thing. It's like, no, we've got our good parenting and we've got our not so great parenting. And the difference is that when you apply pressure So we can all be great parents when there's no pressure. And the minute you put pressure on, and it can be external pressure, so that's, you know, like rushing to get ready for school. It can be, you know, resistance from the kids where they push back. So it's like just an external pressure, or it can be an internal pressure. And internal pressures are fears. So basically, like when we have a fear of something, it gives us an uncomfortable emotion, and then we respond to that emotion. And that's where our own stuff comes into it, because we're all emotional beings. Emotion's energy. It's in our cells of our body. You can't escape it. There's just and that's why you do what you do, emotional intelligence, you know, stuff. But it's about that the stuff that we haven't solved within us. When pressure is applied, we will then revert to our unconscious programming. So that then brings out the, you know, non-conscious strategic parent that you don't necessarily want to be. But it goes even deeper than that, because, and I'll explain how my mind works, and perhaps, you know, I'm unique, but I highly doubt it, is that when we worry, we create like these little mind movies, and we go into a little experience. So, you know, and so that's where our past comes into it. Because just say, for example, I am, you know, a child that experienced bullying at school, or I was a child that was overweight, or was a child that had some kind of experience, or even if I'm, you know, had an observation of a certain experience, if I project that fear into my mind as a mind movie. So just to give you an example, I was speaking to a mum today. She said, you know, I'm so worried about my child. She's eating nothing but noodles, and she doesn't want to shower, and she's putting on weight. And I said to her to stop there. Like, tell me where this movie goes in your head, you know, and we project it forward. Like, what if this happens, and this happens, and this happens? And then, you know, you've got them basically as a tragedy if they follow that path. Like, oh, if they don't study, if they fail their exams, they're going to not get a good job, they're going to end up broke and miserable. And so you run this mind movie experience into the future of how your child is going to end up so badly affected. And that's all imprinted. Like, all those fears are imprinted from within us. Like, in actual fact, the child's just eating a packet of noodles and doesn't want to have a shower, but we take it somewhere else, if that makes sense. And so that's where we need to be aware, like, what emotion is driving, like if it's what the fear is, and then of that imagination that we're taking this forward with, so that we're not, you know, catastrophizing our children's future. And the mum that I was speaking to today, I said to her, you know, what are you seeing the future for your daughter? And she explained, like, this terrible future. I said, instead of seeing the stuff that's in front of you and making that a reality and projecting it along your pathway, see your child as good. It's so important that you see your child as good. If your child is, you know, mucking up, not listening, doing all those things that kids do, we can turn them into, you know, mini terrorists into the future in our mind. But in actual fact, we just need to see them through, like, the filter of goodness. Like, yeah, so I don't know if I explained that at all well, but
you did. And it 100% makes sense to me, because I just had this conversation a couple of days ago with a parent, how important it is that we are aware of our lens through which we're seeing our kids.
Yes.
Right. And I would assume, like, I think our lens has been, like, formulated and created based on that programming, and based on the conditioning, and based on how we were parented when we grew up.
Yes.
And if we're not aware of that, we're kind of just, you know, doing our best. We are all doing our best with the skills we have.
Yes.
But how powerful is it to almost, like, take that step back and up and have that outsider, zoomed out perspective to see, wow, I'm really seeing my child as so naughty or so misbehaving and intentionally pushing my buttons, and what energy we are bringing to the interactions with our kids when we have that lens versus the lens of my child's struggling here, hasn't yet developed empathy, patience, kindness, impulse control, all those things, right?
So true, so true. And so that's that perceptual position, that perceptual filter, like what you called it, affects all our non-verbal cues. So when a child is picking stuff up, so like kids up to the age of 7 are in theta brainwave, so they're actually in a state of hypnosis. So that's why they use their imagination to play, and that's why they're going, this is so boring, Mr. Postman's coming. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, that's actually
oh my God, I had this conversation today because I was watching and learning something, and I had it with my husband, and I was saying, babe, in the 0 to 2, they're in the delta brainwave, and this means this, and then in 0 to 7, like up to 7, they're in the theta brainwave. So they are essentially in a state of unconscious, like hypnosis, and that's why they're learning. They're sponges, we call them, and they're absorbing everything. We're bloody programming them, and if we don't realize we're doing that, then we don't realize the things we say, the things we do, our nonverbal communication, and the energy we bring, that's programming them. You can program them this way, or you could program them that way. And if we're not conscious, if we're not aware of it, well, then we're just like pushing, splashing our stuff out on our kids, which I'm sure I've done. Oh my gosh.
We've all done it. We've all done it. There's no one that's exempt from this.
So help us. How do we not do this?
Okay. So
I'm taking notes.
Oh, come on.
Oh, I love it.
Okay, so the basically, before we go on to that, before we go into the note taking and the action points, which we didn't prepare for this conversation, so it's sort of just all over the shop. But I just want to just talk a little bit about I know you talk about consistency with parenting, because that's one of the important things of being a parent, but there's got to be a consistency with the words that you say and the non-verbal cues. So you can say, oh, you're so important to me and I love you, but if you're not communicating that with the rest of yourself, or I trust you and you're so clever, but then that unconscious fear comes in and says, oh, if I don't do this for them, they'll fail. So that's where you get like stuff like enabling, and it's like where your unconscious is saying, this little person needs me to do this, but your conscious mind says, to be a good parent, I have to, say the good thing, but it's not matching. And the kids will pick that up. They're going to pick the negative one because it's going to come through on the actions. And again, a parent I was speaking to was when people talk, they're like, blah 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 blah, and it's so, and I'm listening for the words, and she said, because I know my daughter's not strong enough to deal with that, and blah 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 blah. And I said, stop. Just go back, rewind that. What did you just say? She said, I know my daughter's not strong enough to deal with that. And I said, is that how you see your daughter? Because if you see her like that, that's the message she's going to get. You're not strong enough to deal with anything. And so that's the stuff. That's our stuff. And this is how you can tell, because the stuff that's coming out of you will be your stuff. So that lady, her thing was, I'm not strong enough to deal with it. So then I have to protect my child, who's also not going to be strong enough. Or if you felt rejected as a child, you will say, like, I don't want my child to feel rejected. Or if you were bullied as a child, I don't want my child to be bullied. Or if you're overweight, I don't want my child to be overweight. So it's about that. I don't want my child to go through what I went through. That's another big part of the stuff, because when we don't want, it's actually creating a focus and energy. So if 0 is neutral, then want is a positive and don't want is a negative, but they're still part of the
It's still creating a bit of pull in a
Pull. It's a
way. You
pull.
say, I
Yeah.
don't want my child to turn out like this or that.
Yeah.
It's still creating that pull
Yeah.
almost because you're focusing on that and you're putting out that energy.
And I'll tell you when this is really, really key for all the parents out there that are separated. And perhaps you don't like particular things, you know, I don't want my son to grow up to be a such and such like his dad. Do you know what I mean? So that I don't want that. And then we're looking at life through the filter of that energy of this negative thing. So instead of thinking about what you don't want your child to go through, or don't want your child to turn into, or don't want your, you know, it's about shifting it over and saying what you do want. So if you don't want your child to turn out to be a liar, then what you do want is for your child to grow up to be honest. So if you don't want your child to be, you know, bullied, then what you do want is for your child to have lots of supportive friends and a happy school life. So it's about moving away from the fear, which is the, you know, underlying motivator, because that fear is getting projected onto the child. So if you think about animals in the wild, it's like lion, that's fear. So when you know, the deer or whatever is with the mother deer, she gives out, like, there's a danger signal, she goes on hyper alert, she's giving out that signal, the baby knows like something's going on, I've got to stay close, I'm not safe. And then the lion comes and they all escape and whatever. If we're giving like those primal signals, there's something to be afraid of, to our kids through our non-verbal cues, while we're saying, you know, look, school's a safe place, go and have a good day, you know, if anyone bullies you, just, you know, whatever it is we're doing, we're still, that's in our body, is that fear that's getting communicated across. So yeah, it's shifting that, solving it in us, so that it no longer is there. So it's no longer a focus, no longer a trigger, no longer, whether it's, you know, resentment towards people or whatever, which that brings me to another point.
Yes, go on.
Which I speak to too many parents. Okay, so back to the parents who are no longer together. There sometimes can be a desire in us for the child to see the truth or know the truth, or to be able to recognize that, you know, us as being right or good, or the other parent to be not so good if they've let us down, or perceived to be let us down. And it's just so important. That's our stuff, it's not the child's stuff. And it's so important to not project that stuff. That's actually a really a conscious thing as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that is so important. And I can see how, you know, even between people in the family or extended family, when there is that the stuff that's going on within us, if we haven't reconciled that or moved past it, integrated it, whatever, and overcome it and made peace with the cousin or the in-law or the whatever, or the ex-partner, then that stuff is going to be coming out in the way we move and the way we speak about them, and our energy and stuff like that. That stuff is very hard to hide. And I think, I wonder if you agree, that kids are much more energetic beings than us. So they pick up on the energy and the nonverbal stuff that is underneath the surface. We're not saying it. We might be saying, you know, have a great day at Dad's, you know, he loves you so much. But underneath we're like, oh, got to send him there again, you know. That stuff kind of comes through. So that's why we're talking about how important it is to do the work yourself and sort out your own house. What do they call, what is that saying? So that you're not letting that, like, we can say splashing it out or projecting it out, but it's just affecting, it's impacting the connection you have with your child and the way you're connecting and communicating with them, because it's under the surface there and kids can feel it, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So
Definitely.
I want to quickly ask you, because I can see the time where I knew we would chat. But one thing I did want to ask you about, and this may be left of center that we weren't really going to talk about, but is the as you said, there is now data and research, and we know that the stuff that we, the emotion and the energy and the things that we have affecting us can go back several generations. So can you explain a bit about, because I was new to that last year, the end of it last year, this year, sort of thing. I'm just learning about how that can really several generations back before we were even born, that stuff can affect us, that comes through in our DNA, that is held in there and impacts the way we show up now and our beliefs and our paradigms and all that stuff. So can you share a little bit about that stuff for everyone?
Okay, so there's been several studies using human DNA, but one that is really interesting is with rats. So they took a group of rats, and I never like animal studies because they always involve, being mean to animals. But anyway, they took a group of rats and they released a scent of cherry blossoms, and that the rats liked the cherry blossom smell. That's all good. And then they started electrocuting them. So every time they smelled the cherry blossoms, so it was unpleasant, and they didn't enjoy that. So it was cherry blossom smell, cherry blossom smell. So what started happening is that the cherry blossom smell would come, and they stopped electrocuting them, but they would all panic. So it'd be cherry blossoms like, we're going to be electrocuted. And so then they took those rats, and they took them out of the experiment, and they let them live a nice life and mate and whatever. And then they took the babies and they put them into the little box and put the cherry blossom smell in. Now, these babies had not been exposed to the electric shock, but they all went crazy when they smelt the cherry blossoms. So this stuff comes down, it's programmed in, and the other one was about the concentration camps, and that was done on people. So they looked at the DNA, and epigenetics means that they used to believe that our DNA was fixed, like this is who you are and that is it. And then they realized and recognized and proved that our DNA is actually constantly changing, and it is in response to our environment. So epigenetics relates to the environment, but it goes further than that, because it's actually changed by our thoughts as well. Because if you think about life, you live 90% of your life is lived in your mind. Like, we're all just in a space this big, in a body, and having experiences, but most of it is our mind that's interpreting data. So our thoughts affect not just the energy around us, but they actually affect the cells in our body. So that is huge. And when I talk about like heal or repeat, or heal, or someone else has to switch it off, or someone else will have to switch it off in families, I'm talking about that epigenetics type of stuff, being able to switch this stuff off. So whether it's a fear of electrocution from cherry blossoms, wherever the rats, they need to switch that off so that it doesn't come through. It has no purpose for them to feel that way when they. But so when we have triggers, emotional triggers, they that kind of stuff can get passed down to future generations. So it's not every child. Like, you might get two kids and one gets the worry gene. it's like eye color, one comes out like this and one comes out like that, but somewhere it shows up down the line. So it is super important.
Oh, it's just such a reminder for me. And I hope this is for parents watching along. If you guys are watching live now on Facebook, or if you are watching later on YouTube, I really hope this stuff sinks in for all of us, because not to do like a scaremongering thing, you know, oh my God, I've got this, what about this, my grandma, and da da da. You know, there are those things we can't control what has happened. Like Naomi said, we can only control ourselves, not even our kids. So this is why it is so, it's, I think, imperative. It's our responsibility as parents. Naomi's work is so aligned, so is mine on this, to really say, you know what, okay, it stops with me, or I'm going to stand up and do something about this and overcome my anxiety. I'm going to work hard on that. Yeah, it's hard, it's uncomfortable, I don't want to face that. Well, what's that beautiful quote about the that which you most want to find is where you least want to look. So it is bloody uncomfortable. People talk about the dark night of the soul, and obviously with Naomi's work, you don't need to go back and talk through it and rehash it. You know, and my work is obviously different around coaching parents and looking at how they can change interactions that way. It's all almost the same thing, you know, but it just says to me that this stuff, like, it is our responsibility now, or it's going to be our kids' responsibility. And that's what you said, Naomi. So we can either choose to go, yeah, no, I don't want to be that shouty, snappy parent anymore. Yeah, I don't want to be caged by that anxiety and the worry and the fear anymore, or the depression, or things like that. It can stop with us. Like, we now have oodles of data and research and knowledge and information about the brain and hypnotherapy and so much stuff. It's almost like, here it all is, guys. And that's what I say to the parents I work with when I meet them. I'm like, I will give you everything I have, all the knowledge, all the research, all the learning, you know, the last 20, 30 years of research and stuff that's been done for us. It's almost like it's a disservice to our kids not to use that, because now we know so much. I don't want to say better, well, we do, than our parents. Like, our parents did the best they could with the tools and the skills they had at the time. I think we need to do the best we can and not think, oh, you know, well, it's too hard, or I don't want to, or I can't find the time. I'm like, actually, now is the time. There are people like me and Naomi and many other people with different modalities that are here to build your capacity as a parent to be able to do this stuff and overcome it and not project it onto your kids. Like, I feel like I should get back down off my soapbox, but
I do get people bringing me teenagers, and because that's, you know, often when kids get into high school, like they can kind of be kiddish when they're younger, and the anxiety might be low level, like, you know, things like sucking your thumb or not wanting to be away from mum. So it's kind of cute. But when they get into the high school and it starts to get into the peer stuff, so the parents may bring a teenager, and in the beginning I would say, okay, I'll work with the child. But now it's like, okay, I can work with the child after at least one of the parents. So which one's it going to be? Because what often happens, and parents say like, oh, but no, I really, it's so important to work with her or him. But the truth is that we get the results when the parents are doing the work. So it's kind of like the parent does the work, and then they say, thank you, I'm so glad I did that, and, you know, everything's going so much better now, and we can do some work with the child as well. But yeah, it's so interesting, and what comes up, and the few times that I have worked with the kids and then realized afterwards I should have, you know, done the work with the parents as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's the way, I think. Oh my goodness, like I feel like we could chat for another 45 minutes, but we should leave it there tonight, because I know that there would be so many more questions. I've got to have you on again, and we can like dive in deeper into other stuff. But
we can go into guilt, parent guilt, mum guilt.
Oh, let us know, guys, if you think that would be really beneficial, or you would like to hear us and Naomi talk about mum guilt. Can you please put mum guilt in the comments in Facebook? Just like mum guilt. I'm watching it here. I want to see. So much guilt. Leanne says yes. Yeah, definitely. I've got a couple of very quick questions, if that's all right. I know we're kind of going a bit late. one of the questions was, if we catch ourselves projecting our past or certain filters onto our kids, is there a mantra or something we should say to ourselves to correct it? So can I get your thoughts on that? And then maybe one other question before we hop off.
Okay, so it's always good if something's happening to like stop and look inward and find out what the root of that is. So being aware. So awareness precedes change. It doesn't cause change, but it precedes change. So it's really important to have that there. So being able to say, okay, what's this really about? Like, what's this really about? So, and obviously, like, depending on the age of the child, it's going to be different kinds of stuff. So it's very hard to pinpoint. But if you can work out what the fear is, like, what is my fear? And it could be something like, I'm not being respected, I've got no power, comparing, like, feeling not good enough as a, is it, why my kid doing this, like all those sorts of things. So dig down to find, like, what is the fear underneath. So if you dig deep enough, there's a process I do which goes, what's under that? So like you'll get anger. So say anger's like, I feel so angry, I just want to, and so you're like, what's under the anger? And then drop down into that. What's under the frustration? What's under, until you get down to work out what's actually there. And sometimes it's not what you think it is. So as far as mantras, I'd probably say that it won't, mantras work, but they're slow, like it's slower. So if something works for you, that, like, this too shall pass, or, take a deep breath in, or feel where it is in your body, put your hand on your stomach, your hand on your heart, breathe through it, like all that sort of stuff. All this stuff works. But honestly, just getting back and dealing with whatever the root cause is, which you wouldn't know until you do some work on it yourself.
Yeah, really good. I totally wholeheartedly agree with that. It's what is this moment bringing up in me, because I'm having a reaction to what's going on. And usually, like you said, it's our child not listening, appearing to be disrespectful or rude, moving too slowly in the morning, like that stuff is that is the trigger that just brings up something unresolved in us, that we haven't yet sort of overcome and come at peace with. And there are so many other ways to connect with your child, or get them to listen, or to earn their respect, and to connect with them and stuff, rather than blowing up and shouting and things like that. Maybe I'll ask a very quick last question, because it's so late. I feel so terrible. We're probably ready for bed, you and I.
Oh, you've got that headache too, you poor little thing.
That's okay.
We'll let you go soon, Steph.
Yes. The last one is, what about if the child has been directly affected by behaviours of a parent? So that question came through a few minutes ago. And then we had 4 people saying, mum guilt, mum guilt, mum guilt, 5. So much guilt. So we should do something on it. But yeah, what about if a child has been directly affected by behaviours of a parent? So then,
there's 2 responses to that. So the first thing is that kids are they're like your liver, they're forgiving and they heal. So we can solve things, like that thing, when we heal, we take the healing necessity away from the child. So there's a thing called entanglement. It's a quantum physics thing. It basically says that when I change, everything changes. So my change affects my children, and I'll jump to a conclusion.
Writing that down. Entanglement.
I would jump to an assumption that it potentially may not be, if there's 2 parents, that it could potentially be the other parent. So somebody else can affect your child, and it's not in your control. So the thing you can do still is always working on yourself, because one of the things with childhood trauma isn't what we went through. The key factor is the two things. One is the powerlessness, but the second one is feeling alone. So you can go through almost anything if you're not alone, if you feel like there's someone to turn to. And there's a thing called the ACE score, adverse childhood events, and like people who've gone through a lot of those, if they have someone to turn to. So one of the questions I ask when I'm working with people is, who did you turn to for comfort? So having a really strong person there that can provide that comfort and support without putting their stuff onto the child is just like a really healing space that can get people through a lot of stuff, because not everybody who had a not so great childhood turns out to be not so great. Some people grow up to be absolutely brilliant, and you think, like, how come, what's the determining factor? A sense of personal power and not feeling alone, feeling supported and feeling understood. Like those three things, that you're accepted and acceptable, and you belong, and you're not different, and that you are capable and able, and that you're adequate, that you're enough, that you're good enough, smart enough, all that kind of stuff. So having all that stuff there mitigates a lot of the damage.
And so if it was maybe another parent, and you're now with your child, for example, if this is the situation, then there is so much that we can do, like the parent who's still there, with their energy and the way they connect with their child, the way they communicate with the child, the messages they're sending their child about being worthy and enough and able and capable and all of that stuff. And something you said about, when there's a person there who's going through it with you and you're not alone. I've done some resilience training and through the Resilience Centre in Sydney, and that training really taught us that adversity is necessary to build resilience. You cannot, without going through adversity, you can't build a resilient being. And also a huge protective factor for kids and adults in building resilience is having people around you that you can turn to. And that could be a really close teacher at school, or an aunt, or the mum, or the dad, or, so it's someone, there's multiple, obviously, protective factors in building resilience, but that is one of them, having someone you can turn to, that you can open up to. And if it's not one parent, it can be the other, or it's a trusted uncle, or, something like that. So lots and lots that we can do, which is really, really good. And also work on ourselves.
Yes. The main key take home, which we probably bypass, we've kind of swerved around, is that when we heal within us, when we change, everything changes. We can change even relationships that we felt were like beyond repair, even kids that we felt like, how can this ever turn around? Or situations all around us. And it's just by working within, getting yourself to a place where you know who you are. Your unconscious programming is something of your own choice, not what was put there by whatever, whoever and whenever. Choosing what that is, and then being able to operate so that even when the pressure comes down, even when you are switching into fight, flight, freeze mode to get through, there's nothing there that's going to come out that's going to do damage to or put stuff onto the kids. It's important. Beautiful. That is such an awesome takeaway, to turn our eyes inward and start working on ourselves first. That's all we need to do. So thank you for that. That was eye-opening. I think there's so many gold nuggets in there. I think if you guys are watching along now on Facebook, please put in the comments something that you took away from this, something that maybe you didn't know, or perhaps that now you're going to focus on now that you do know it. Please put something in there. Naomi and I are about to hop off, and we're going to check out some of the comments and respond to you guys. So, beautiful. And if you're watching this later,
put a little hashtag replay so we know. Thank you so much, Naomi. That was incredible.
Thank you for having me, Steph. And thanks to all the mums and dads out there doing such a great job and taking the time to think and listen and learn and all the stuff, like just like Steph and I do constantly. We're all learning, and yeah, it's just fantastic.
Yep. Yeah, it is. It is. These parents are incredible. Not just the parents in the group. I'm biased because they're in the group and they're watching and learning and absorbing. But parenting can be a really tough gig sometimes. So I want to say thank you for everyone to watching along. And can you let us know how we kind of touched on earlier, but just let us know again briefly, how do you work with people? How can people get in touch with you? Where can they go to learn more and what you've got coming up, all that kind of good stuff?
So at the moment, I'm focusing mainly on groups. So it's a 6-week program. I'm mainly focusing, the programs actually are focusing on, women, adult women, so over sort of 18, 20. And that is, the program's called Overcome Anxiety and Depression in 6 weeks without years of therapy. You don't need to be radically anxious or radically depressed. The stuff it's very content focused, educational. There's a lot of self-reflection activities, webinars, inspiration sessions, and then we do a big breakthrough session in weeks 4 and 5, which clears out a whole stack of stuff, like all those powerless events that may have impacted us when we were younger, and get ourselves into a space where we're operating from an identity that is like true to who we really are, and not clouded with all the stuff that we've picked up that's probably holding us back.
Wow. So you got that program, and where can people connect with you and get in touch?
So I have a Facebook group called Anxiety Free Life. I'll paste the link in the comments. My website, which is very, very outdated and probably not that great at all, needs some work, mylocalhypnosis.com.au. And that's probably the 2 best places. My Local Hypnosis has a Facebook page as well. So
Okay, awesome.
I'll paste some links underneath. It's probably the easiest.
Yeah, we'll put all the links in, and once this goes up a little bit later on YouTube as well, all the links will be in the description below, so you guys can connect with Naomi. Thank you so much for your time tonight, Naomi.
Oh, it was great. It was fun. I always love chatting with you.
We chatted for way longer. Oh, it's just gone 9:01. So we aimed for half an hour, and here we go.
Oh dear.
All right. Thank you so much. And everyone else, have a beautiful evening or morning, wherever you are in the world. And we will see you guys next time. See ya.
Bye-bye.